Oh, goodness. Well, I was totally gonna. Well, maybe it won't connect. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. It is Sunshine, the pink haired sober witch, and you are listening to the Sober Witch Life podcast. That's right. I'm watching these things try to connect, and I'm live streaming. I did not intend to share this one on LinkedIn, but I've already kicked this off, and I'm not going to have these weird, awkward. Yeah. Anyways, it'll connect. Then you get this weird and strange topic today. If it doesn't, then go me. Thank the universe for that one. But um, today's topic is pretty, it's really lovely and wonderful for me to share, but it also has a little bit of tenderness to me. So just fair warning on that. But, I always write what I want to talk about first. I know I myself, I'm not really one to listen to audio or to watch videos, but I will read the heck out of some articles. So I always try to make sure that we're kind of reflecting that practice with anything that we create. And so today I want to talk about this beautiful truth that I've realized, which is something that I've learned in my recovery, right? You know, and as I was writing this morning and stuff, I was exploring more of it, but I've realized that recovery has taught me so much about love, probably more about love than almost any other topic outside of just addiction, right? Recovery has taught me so much about love. Once upon a time, I used to believe that devotion meant enduring everything, right? But recovery taught me that healthy love should not require me to abandon myself. So this past week, my partner and I celebrated 5 years together, and it's interesting. I had somebody very close to me. I mentioned this, and they said, "Oh wow, that's a long time. Is that your longest relationship?" And I realized it's not. And I said that. I said it's not my longest relationship, but it is absolutely my longest healthy relationship, right? And we took some time to celebrate. We took a little trip. Um, we got out of our normal lives because I think when we have this, when you live with someone, you end up in a lot of ritual, a lot of routine, a lot of habits. So we snuck away and we spent time swimming and playing and just really enjoying each other. And it was really lovely because during our witches recovery circles, we always talk about celebrations. And so I celebrated those 5 years. And one of the individuals in circle said, "I love seeing the love between the two of you." And I was just, it was such a warm thing, right? I think about all of the times in my life that I've looked at a couple, I've looked at two people that love each other, and I've just thought that it was, I don't know, maybe even a fairy tale. Like it was a daydream, that it was great for them, but I didn't really know that it was ever possible. And to hear that, it touched me because I love this fact too. I love being able to adore him and to care for him and to laugh with him and to, I'm sure, annoy the heck out of him every now and again. I love the fact that we get to build a life together and I get to watch how he continues to grow, right? He supports all of my work, all of this work. He supports the dreams that I have. But most importantly, he supports my recovery. He understands that it is not separate from our relationship. It's actually something that our relationship is built on top of, right? Because before recovery, I felt like love was something I had to earn, right? And it's really weird as I sat there and thought about it today. It's like love kind of like always felt like a prize, right? That if somebody had chose me or, decided to be with me, like I'd somehow cracked this code and like accomplished something, right? Like I won this privilege of being loved. And there's always been an intensity to the relationships, but it wasn't this intensity of like connection, not like it is with my partner. It was an intensity of like victory, right? Look at me. Look at what I have. Look at who chose me. Look at how important I must be. But the problem with believing that you've won love is that you also have to live with this fear that you might lose it. So if I'd obviously earned someone's love by being, I don't know, attractive to them in a certain way, or useful, or patient, or forgiving, then someone else could come around and, in essence, do that better, right? They could be more attractive or more interesting or less complicated or easier to love, and I could lose it. I could just lose all of it at any time. And because of this, there was always an anxious current that ran in all of my relationships. Even when things felt really good, part of me was always alert and watching for some kind of sign that things could go wrong. So I would make myself useful. I would be the person that could fix anything. I would take care of it. I would manage the house. I would pay all of the bills. I would solve all the problems. I would take any of the emotional blows. I forgave all of the lies, and I stayed well beyond the point that someone else with a healthier understanding of love would have ever, right? They would have walked away. But being needed made me feel secure. Not safe, but secure. So as long as someone needed me, I believed I was less likely to be abandoned. And the reality is, I learned a lot of this by watching my mother stay. My father was an alcoholic, and my mother was the enabler in that relationship. It didn't matter if he became verbally aggressive or abusive. She would just kind of like turn another cheek. She would tolerate it. She would just absorb it. She would just, frankly, she would just clean, right? Hum and clean. Lots of memories of that. She did whatever it took for her to keep the family functioning around all of that addiction. And as a child, you don't understand codependence or enabling or trauma or any of these survival patterns, right? I just understood what I saw. And I saw an individual in a relationship doing whatever they needed to do to remain devout, regardless of whatever was happening to them or anyone within the family. I learned that love came with pain, and that the loving thing to do was to toughen up, to take it. And I carried all of those lessons into my own relationships. In my 20s, I had a deeply codependent relationship in which I slowly became more like a parent than I was a partner. Later, I became so enamored with an individual that I would accept the scraps that were given to me, and I would accept this fact that he would only call on me when he needed something. I would accept all these tiny bits of attention because I believed receiving anything meant that I'd been chosen. And when I got married, I fell in love with Prince Charming. Like, I had this kind of fairy tale. I ignored all of the stories that I'd heard about emotional abuse because I believed our love was going to be different. I believed I would be different enough to change the ending, right? I excused a lot of lies in my relationships. I excused name calling, emotional abuse, manipulation, and being told that I was the problem anytime that I expressed concern. I excused a lot of things. Severe drug use, somebody stealing my car, somebody, in essence, kind of stealing money from me. I believe love just meant staying through it all. But when I first got sober, it was in October, and I was still with somebody that I deeply loved. And he had struggled heavily with addiction. Early in on our relationship, he'd relapsed on heroin and eventually started to do medically supervised treatment. But treatment didn't end his addictive behaviors. It kept him from returning to the opioids, but it didn't stop him from drinking or hiding other substances or reaching for anything that he could really get his hands on. And I was about 30 days sober and had already spent years living in this instability of his addiction, not quite even understanding right now what mine was like. So I was approaching Thanksgiving, and it was my first Thanksgiving, my first real holiday without alcohol, and I was really terrified, right? I didn't know how I was going to move through that holiday sober. I didn't know what was going to happen when all of the normal rituals and the emotions and the expectations of the day arrived without me having the choice or the ability to kind of numb myself. And then my partner announces that he's leaving to go spend Thanksgiving with his family. He hadn't seen this family in years. And to be honest, he had avoided them through most of our relationship. There had always been some kind of tension or some kind of weirdness, and I didn't understand it all. So when he decided that he just all of a sudden needed to go home, I couldn't make any sense of it. All I knew is that I was barely a month sober. I was incredibly emotionally raw, and I was desperately afraid of being left alone. And I begged him not to leave. I cried. I cried for hours, a couple of times. I told him I didn't know how I was going to be able to get through the holiday by myself. I told him that I was really, really vulnerable, and I did not want to be abandoned when I needed support the most. I'd also convinced myself that this was a form of punishment. I'd relapsed twice that year, and that last time, I was so incredibly cruel to him that I was just carrying all of this shame. And so, here I was feeling punished, feeling like I was being abandoned. But the reality is underneath all of this, there was another truth that was starting to bubble up that I wasn't ready to say out loud. And that's that all of this, that entire relationship was not really love, even though I loved him. The reality is my body had known for a really long time, but my mind was only starting to admit. Right? And only starting to admit because of recovery, right? I'd been in active addiction with him pretty much the entire relationship. And I'd started to just wait for whatever the next lie was, right? Waiting, watching, checking, questioning, preparing myself for some secret that I was going to uncover, because that's the truth and the reality. I had been uncovering secrets really throughout our entire relationship. But I'd been avoiding seeing them, like really, truly seeing them for what they were, because I was in my active addiction. Even when we were on that vacation where I hit my rock bottom, he'd snuck away on our first night to find someone selling drugs and then lied to me about it. To think that whole situation ended up in the way that it did, and all there was a bunch of drugs, alcohol, and lies. But it had become normal. All of this dishonesty, all of this manipulation, all of this emotional surveillance that I was doing became normal. And I'd confused this hypervigilance with intimacy between the two of us. Recovery did forced me to choose a boundary. I'd realized a few weeks into my sobriety, right before he announced that he was heading out of town, that I really couldn't have a partner that was going to drink. Like, I loved a partner in crime because there was something incredibly exciting and salacious and just there was about being with somebody that drank and partied in the way that I wanted to. Shared destruction felt like chemistry with me and somebody else. Sobriety forced me to recognize that what felt thrilling for me, exciting, was also really dangerous. So I made it clear that drinking around me was not acceptable. And I made it clear that using or abusing drugs around me was not acceptable. But it didn't stop the behavior. It just made him work harder at hiding it, which, looking back, could very well be the reason he decided to go to New Hampshire for the holidays in the first place. And I probably would have left him, right, a lot sooner than I did if it wasn't for the fact that just 6 months after I stepped into recovery, the world shut down, the pandemic set in, right? So here all of us were forced into isolation together. I don't regret that extra time because it did teach me one of the hardest lessons that I think I've had to learn, and probably one of the most important. I could accept that he was an addict and that he was suffering and he was struggling, right? But I didn't have to remain available for the consequences of his own actions, right? Accepting who he was did not mean I had to approve of it. Being compassionate didn't mean that I had to allow him access to me. Loving him didn't require me to house him or rescue him or manage him. And it took time, right? That whole pandemic, I mean, there's a whole nother story in that because it wasn't just the addiction. There was some severe mental health challenges that he faced during that time as well. Which meant that for almost 2 years after I decided to get sober, I focused on setting boundaries and holding boundaries and staying strong to my boundaries until the point came that eventually I had to realize he wasn't going to change simply because I loved him. Asking him to move out was one of the hardest things that I've ever done in my life because I did love him very deeply. I just knew that once he left, our worlds would not be the same. I also knew that if I allowed him to stay, my recovery may not survive. At some point in those 2 years, though, I recognized that the relationship that I was in was not the relationship that I had wanted, right? And so I did what any reasonable witch would do. I cast a spell. I wrote it, I cast it, right? And I know somewhere in my house it's still written down. I don't know where. I haven't looked at it in a while, but I created a spell to call in a partner, somebody who truly was a partner, who met me halfway, who was a phenomenal lover, who was going to be my best friend, who could connect with me and meet me emotionally and spiritually and intellectually and physically all on the same page, who we just got each other. And, we worked some sex magic and we did ritual over a couple of days. And it was one of the most intense rituals that I had probably done since I got the house that I live in now, right? And it took just over 3 months before I met the man who would become my partner. He was the first person that I had spoken to when I decided to start dating who said they were completely sober. Because at that particular point, right, I told you what my boundary was. I wasn't going to be with anybody that drank, right? That was a really big deal for me. So I would have people that said, hey, I'm not a big drinker. I don't really drink that often. Yeah. I'd have people tell me, oh, I just won't drink around you. But that wasn't the point. And he didn't make any promises. He knew what sobriety meant because he was living it, right? I didn't want to have to explain why I chose not to drink. I didn't want to have to justify this as the boundary or wonder whether or not at some point in my recovery, in some point in this relationship, that my choice to not drink would be inconvenient. And he was honest with his life too. We were both still involved with other people when we met. We were really upfront about that. There were no secrets in the relationship. We didn't have to uncover anything. There were no hidden expectations that, would explode later on. And I really think that that honesty created a layer of safety that I hadn't felt in a relationship in a really long time. I like to think of our relationship as a magical blessing from the universe. A desire that I clearly spoke out loud, a request that was heard, a spell that was cast that came to life. But our relationship has not survived on magic alone. It's been tough, right? It's been a journey to learn what that healthy love looks like. We were dating for about 5 months before I'd asked that partner to leave, my former partner to move out. And that other relationship had always been open, so it wasn't a surprise. This wasn't an act of betrayal or anything of that nature. But it didn't make the ending of the relationship any easier, right? Because I was incredibly heartbroken. I felt like my entire world was kind of collapsing around me. I was crying myself to sleep. I was crying throughout the day multiple times, like breaking up with someone, like truly being at the point in my life where I'm trying to heal my relationship with love, that I realize that I have to, I truly deeply love this person. And I know he loved me back, but I have to ask him to leave because that's how I love myself. That's how I can't even begin to describe that. And I could never have done that if I wasn't sober, right? And so my new partner was checking in on me. He was listening to me. He was offering me kindness without trying to hurry me through any of this grief. He didn't have to rescue me from any of these decisions. He just walked beside me or sat beside me as I lived through them. And that mattered a lot. Healthy love isn't trying to swoop in and try to fix people or erase our pain. It's someone who can witness it with us without trying to exploit it or control it or making it about themselves. Throughout the years, he's listened to me about the temptations or my fears or the grief or any of the complicated realities of recovery. We've been able to have these conversations. We've supported each other through the difficult times, the personal times, loss, But I don't want to turn him into Prince Charming, because I've already questioned that fairy tale. We're not perfect. We've had plenty of fights. We've certainly hurt each other. We've had blow-ups. We both carry a lot of wounds and defensive patterns from other relationships, our childhood. When I become triggered, I freeze. I quiet, I'm shut down. I, will try to disassociate. I may even try to fawn, That's my triggering. And for his, he gets angry. He wants to fight, And so it's not always pretty. It's not always a beautiful thing. But the difference between this relationship and all the other relationships that I've been in the past is that we're both willing to look at what happened. We're both willing to see it. We take the space that we need, but we return to each other. We apologize and we try again. We work to become safer people for each other, right? some silly examples, right? He doesn't like when I refer to him as dude. Just doesn't like it. And it can slip out of my mouth in conversation sometimes when I'm trying to make a serious conversation feel casual, or like for me to feel more comfortable in it. But because he's told me he doesn't like that, I try my hardest to make an effort not to use it. I still slip every now and again, but I try. Right? Respect isn't always demonstrated in a romantic gesture. Sometimes it's in these little things, like I know he doesn't like me using that word. I've also had to unlearn my habit of keeping a list. In past relationships, the moment I felt like I was cornered in an argument, or I was going to start fighting, right? I would pull out this mental list that I'd made of everything that other individual had done wrong, right? All of the evidence, all of the resentments, right? I'd held on to all of the annoyances, and I would just fire them back at them. I'd use it to prove that I was right and they were wrong. There. There are still things that my partner does that get under my skin, or habits that might annoy me, but I've come to realize that they say more about me than they say about them. There's more in those about who I am than there is for him, right? I've learned how to stop the hounding and the belittling and stop treating being right as being more important than being loving, right? And he's had to do his own work. He's been an individual that isolates, and he's had to learn how to open up and to share and to talk through all of the things that he once upon a time might have held inside. And I watch him try, and he watches me try. And that's what makes this love healthy. There's a really big difference between fighting for a relationship and fighting inside of a relationship. Because when we're fighting inside of the relationship, we're keeping that list, right? We're preserving all of that resentment. We hold on to what our partner has done that is wrong. And there's ultimately a part of us that is trying to get that other person to change. Where when we're fighting for a relationship, we continue to remember why we chose each other in the first place. We become willing to admit to what we're doing that's damaging the connection. We're willing to admit the truth. We're willing to honor boundaries. We're willing to change harmful behaviors rather than trying to perfect our defense of it, right? And it's also like remembering that an apology without changed behavior is just an attempt to reset, or like we're just going to end up in the same argument again. So I want to share a couple of things because you might be in a relationship, right? And I was thinking about this. Here are 3 signs. We're going to give 3 signs that a relationship supports your recovery and 3 signs that it doesn't. First, if it supports your recovery, they respect your boundaries. And I don't care what the boundary is. I don't care if that's a boundary with them, with somebody else. They respect it. They don't argue it. They don't offer guidance or advice about it. They just understand that it took courage for you to set that boundary, and they respect it, right? Second thing, they become a cheerleader of your recovery, right? They celebrate all of the progress that you're making. They call it out. They notice it even when you're not, because they know how hard it is to be in recovery, right? And they don't get sick of you celebrating it. Let's be real. And last but not least, that third one is they are doing their own work. Meaning they're not just sitting there expecting or watching you get healthier. They're doing their own work. They're changing and growing alongside of you in whatever way, shape, or form that they can, right? recovery in and of itself is not just a solo project. It impacts, just as addiction impacts the entire kind of family, recovery does as well. On the flip side, there are 3 signs that you may be sacrificing your recovery in the name of love. And the first one is when you allow individuals to violate your boundaries and you make excuses for it, right? Oh, they're just having a bad day. Oh, they've had something else happen in their life. Oh, work's been really tough. Oh, they didn't mean it. Oh, well, it'll be different next time. I just told them about it, right? The second one is the people pleasing, where you begin placing the other person's feelings or needs or desires ahead of yours, right? You say yes when your body really wants to say no. You abandon your own self because disappointing them feels more dangerous than betraying yourself, right? And I see this one a lot, not just in romantic relationships, but in personal relationships. And the third one is there's a constant mental preparation. You're rehearsing your conversations. You're anticipating their responses. You plan on how to keep them calm. How to avoid making them angry or upsetting them. Right? How do I introduce my needs without triggering an explosion or argument? Because that's not intimacy. That is emotional survival. Right? So for those of you that feel, right, who believe that this chaos and drama is just passion, or, that jealousy shows them, oh, it just means that they really love me, or like, wow, they just, they want to be around me all the time, so they must really love me. Like, I wish I could give you a hug and just hold you and allow you to just like truly feel what healthy and safe love feels like, right? Because somewhere in your life, pain taught you what love was supposed to look like, right? Maybe it was unpredictable when you were young. Maybe you had to earn it, right? But that chaos is not proof of passion, and jealousy is not proof of devotion, and suffering is not proof the relationship is meaningful, right? Passion can flow with ease and delight and feel lovely and wonderful. And when somebody is devoted, they are loyal and respectful to you. And love just, it never needs proof. Love just is. It really is. Healthy love should feel like safety in your body, peace in your mind, and it should light your spirit up. And I'm not saying that healthy relationships are easy. I still have to have difficult conversations. We still trigger each other. I'm sure we've both said things in the last year that we wish we wouldn't have. That healthy love requires work, but you're willing to do it because at the end of the day, you feel safe and respected and understood, and you know that that connection is growing. Recovery did more than just remove alcohol from my life. It changed what I recognized as love. It taught me that loving another person didn't require me to abandon myself. I started this by saying last week I sat beside my partner and we celebrated 5 years of loving each other. 5 years of laughter and grief and arguments and apologies and lots of amazing road trips and vacations. And 5 years of continuing to choose each other over and over again. Once upon a time, I believed that love was something that I had to earn. But recovery has taught me that healthy love is given freely. It's supportive, it's safe, and it is something every single one of us deserves. So, my hope, my wish, my prayer, my intention for you is that each and every one of you listening or watching this, that love that I've described, that it finds you. And that your heart is open enough to receive it. So, until next time, look at this cute little kitty. You know, if you can't see the video, he's adorable. Until next time, my dear friends, much love from me to all of you.